Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Arlington ISD Board of Trustees on May 21st, 2020 at 4:11 p.m. Due to health and safety concerns related to the COVID-19 coronavirus, this meeting will be conducted in video conferencing or telephone. At least a quorum of the board will be participating by video conference in accordance with the provisions of Section 551.125 or 551.127 of the Texas Government Code that have been suspended by order of the governor. Members of the public may access this meeting via AISD website at www.aisd.net. First on our agenda is the swearing in of our school board trustees, and presiding over that swearing in is Congressman Mark Vesey.
Yeah.
Hello, how's everybody doing today?
Hey,
Well,
good.
thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate being invited to preside over the swearing-in ceremonies and to be a part of that with Arlington ISD. It's my first time doing it. I really appreciate being invited.
Thank you.
So, Keisha, do I have a swearing-in script or?
Yes.
Hold on one second, because I don't have anything here with me.
Okay.
Hold on one second here. If you would just bear with me for 1 second.
We are fine. So while he's doing that, I would like to say thank you very much to the congressman for taking time out of his very busy schedule right now dealing with COVID-19. I'm sure he has been back-to-back meetings via Zoom, GoTo, as a lot of us are in and out. So very happy for him to be able to be here with us this night for the swearing in of our new trustees, which would be my colleague, Bowie Hogg, current vice president, and myself, Keisha Mays, current president. So we hope everybody out there is staying safe. We hope everybody is following the directions that is being passed down by our elected officials. And we're really excited that we have seen a very large uptake on people that are at least able to now see what a school board meeting looks like, because it's at earlier hours and you may not necessarily still be in the office. So we're very happy to know that there's an expansion for people to be able to see how the AISD school board meetings are run. So we are very happy for those of you out there that are joining us. Mr. Hogg, is there anything that you'd like to say?
Nothing additional. Thank you, Ms. Mays, and it's been a pleasure. I know we can expedite this, and then when Congressman Vesey is back, we're to move forward. It's been a pleasure to serve and an honor, especially you know, as we didn't have opponents this year, to be able to focus on this different time of students instead of campaign, which has been happening. So appreciate this team staying together, and it truly is a team. So I appreciate all my colleagues and all the staff and all the community members and students we work for.
Well said. Thank you, Mr. Hogg. So for those of you that just need to step away that are watching and just grab a cold drink of water or grab a snack, we will be here as soon as the congressman returns. So I think it will just be a few more moments, but while we're waiting, I'm just gonna put up little signs that we are so excited about upcoming graduation for our seniors.
Yay!
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 It has been really exciting in my neighborhood. I've seen signs that says grad lives here or grad 2020, and it's so nice. There's been a few doors I've even knocked on and said, hey, congratulations on your graduation. So I know everybody is doing the best that they can, but we just want y'all to continue to dream big as you continue, and know that just because these times are a little different, it does not take away from the pride and the excitement that we all have for our graduates. And really happy that we were able to make our announcement that we will be able to see our graduates graduate. So now we've got Congressman Vesey returning. So in just a few seconds, we will continue with our swearing in.
Keisha, thank you very much. And again, appreciate you inviting me to be part of the swearing in ceremonies. I know particularly now that there's a huge focus on education in our country, as school districts and even private schools around the country are trying to figure out how best to educate our young children remotely. And I know as a parent of an 8th grader here in Texas public schools, that we're paying close attention to this as parents. And so I think that your jobs now are really more important than ever. And everybody is really paying very close attention to everything that's going on. And people, and I know parents are eagerly awaiting school districts around the country to see what sort of guidance they're going to get on how the next school year is going to start and how they're going to proceed. And so I know that you have your hands and your work really full right now. And so just appreciate everyone's service. And so if everybody please would raise their right hand and repeat after me. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Bowie Hogg, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the Office of Trustee, Place 6, Arlington Independent School District of the state of Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
I will.
And same for you, Keisha. Keisha Mays, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties of the Office of Trustee, Place 7, Arlington Independent School District. I think Keisha, I think that you need to repeat Keisha after I say I, Keisha Mays. We're going to do that again. I, Keisha Mays.
I, Keisha Mays.
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duty of the Office of Trustee, Place 7, Arlington Independent School District of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
I do.
Well, now under the state of Texas, both you and Trustee Hogg are faithfully sworn in, and I congratulate you on another term in the Arlington Independent School District.
All right, thank you.
Sorry
Thank
for the
you.
technical, and I apologize for the technical difficulties on my end earlier.
Oh, that is okay. I want to thank you. Me and my colleague, Mr. Hogg, want to thank you, Congressman Vesey, for coming here today to swear in our reelection. And we have such a great opportunity in Arlington to elect individuals that the citizens believe will represent them well in making decisions that impact the lives of all of our precious children. So thank you very much for taking time out.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, the Board of Trustees on May 21st, 2020, beginning at 4:21 p.m. will convene in closed session pursuant to sections 551.071 through 551.084 of the Texas Government Code in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act for the topics set forth on our agenda. We will reconvene an open meeting at approximately 5:30.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. So one of the items which preceded this meeting was the swearing in of our re-elected trustees, Mr. Bowie Hogg and myself, Ms. Keisha Mays. So congratulations, Mr. Hogg, on your election. And mine. Thank you. So next we move to the next item on our agenda, which is our organization board of trustees, which is the election of our board officers. So it is our policy each year at this meeting in which we seat trustees for new terms, the election of board officers be placed on the agenda, and at this time, the gavel is handed to the superintendent for the purpose of beginning our elections. This is the only time this happens and is for the purpose of beginning our elections.
Thank you, President Mays. And do we have a motion and a second for President of the Board of Trustees?
Dr. Cavazos, I have a motion.
Motion by Mr. Bowie Hogg.
Hold on, I got to make the motion, Dr. Cavazos.
Okay, I got ahead of myself, Bowie.
It is my honor, and leading a board of trustees is a very difficult thing. Myself and Dr. Reich have done it in the past, and it is no small task. And over the last year, we've had an outstanding leader guiding us this last year. Herding cats is sometimes how it feels, and the amount of phone calls and discussions that you have to have, and decisions to help guide the board. We work efficiently as a team of 7 and team of 8 with Dr. Cavazos, and our board president is critical to our success. She has done an amazing job this last year, so it is with my honor I would move to nominate Keisha Mays to be board president for this coming year.
And I will happily second that.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Bowie Hogg and second by Melody Fowler. Any discussion or other nominations? If not, would you please vote by raising your hand, and we'll go down the list here. Mr. Chapa? You're muted.
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Walton?
I vote in favor.
Mr. Wilbanks?
I vote in favor.
Dr. Reich?
I vote in favor.
Mr. Hogg?
I vote in favor.
Ms. Fowler?
I vote in favor.
Ms. Mays?
I vote in favor.
Wonderful. Congratulations to President Mays for
Yay.
serving again as president. So congratulations, Ms. Mays.
Thank you.
Now back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Now, do we have a motion or a nomination for vice president?
Yes, Madam President. I would like to nominate my esteemed colleague and great leader for all of us, and a great teammate to work with and sit next to. I've learned so much. I would like to nominate Mr. Bowie Hogg for vice president.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Do we have a nomination for secretary?
Hold on. Are you doing it together, Keisha?
No, I'll go back. I'll just get my nominations up front.
Okay.
If that's okay. Yes.
President Mays, I would like to nominate Polly Walton to continue as secretary.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
Keisha, you need a second on both of those.
Okay, did I get a second?
You haven't yet.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Chapa, and we have a second by Ms. Fowler to name Mr. Bowie Hogg as vice president and Ms. Polly Walton as secretary. Okay. So since this meeting is being conducted virtually, our vote will be a roll call. So please state your name and your vote, either yes if you are in favor of the motion or no if you are not in favor of the motion. The motion is to nominate Mr. Hogg as vice president and Ms. Polly Walton as secretary. I will start with Mr. Justin Chapa.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Ms. Polly Walton.
Polly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Wilbanks.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg.
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Dr. Reich.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Congratulations to Mr. Bowie Hogg, our newly elected, re-elected vice president. Congratulations to Ms. Polly Walton, our newly re-elected secretary. Okay, the next part on our agenda, yes. Did I hear someone say something? Okay, so we're going to continue on our agenda. Next thing is our program and a presentation, which will be recognizing our outgoing Student Leadership Advisory Board. Ms. Buell, Dr. Buell.
Good evening, President Mays. Good evening, President Mays, school board members, and Dr. Cavazos. It's my honor and pleasure to be able to support the 2019-20 SLAB members.
Christy, you're on mute.
Dr. Beal, you're on mute.
That was really embarrassing. I'm so sorry. I must have hit it. I'll start over. Good evening, President Mays and school board members and Dr. Cavazos. It's my honor and pleasure to support the 2019-20 SLAB members. The purpose of the SLAB, Student Leadership Advisory Board, is to represent student opinion through regularly scheduled meetings and to have a designated committee that can be brought together quickly for student input as needed. SLAB members assist in building relationships between the students, the Board of Trustees, administration, and the superintendent. The Student Leadership Advisory Board includes 7 members. They're junior class presidents representing the 6 traditional high schools in Arlington Independent School District, and a president elected from the previous year's SLAB board. It's my pleasure to introduce some of our SLAB members that we have here this evening. We have Genevieve Evie Copeland, who is a junior at Bowie High School. Leslie Rocha, who is also a junior at Sam Houston High School. Sophia Ma, who is a junior at Lamar High School. And Isabella Izzy Perez, who is a junior from Arlington High School. We also have a few of our SLAB members this evening that were not able to be present. Heidi Sanchez from Arlington Collegiate, Brandon Parker from Martin High School, Rama Farah from Seguin High School, and Mia Palladini from Lamar High School. She's our SLAB president and serving in her 2nd year. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Trustee Hogg.
Thank you, Dr. Buell, and thank you to our SLAB students. Everyone, all the SLAB students wave, say hello.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I would say welcome to the Zoom call, but I know you've been doing lots of Zoom calls as you've been learning over this last semester. So let me, on behalf of the board, we wanted to give you guys an option and take some time during our meeting to just have a little quick discussion with you and mainly say thank you. Unfortunately, with many things that happened this year, we didn't get to have the normal SLAB year. We haven't had a normal year for anything else, so nothing's different on not having a normal SLAB year for this. You guys were all preparing to start presenting to all of your networks in your schools, and we were all preparing to start having shadow days with you the spring semester. Well, we probably should have shadowed with you on some virtual learning to see how that's going, but we thank you for all your work you've done throughout the year. And we always like to think once you're you serve as your junior year as the SLAB representative, and then you come into your senior year, but you're still continuing that communication with us. It directly ties us. The SLAB was created because it's such a great portal for us to receive feedback from students. I know I still talk to numerous of my SLAB students to this day, and I'm always willing to write a letter of recommendation because you are a leader on your campus as one of your elected leaders for your junior class. So we can't thank you enough for all your work, and you are shining stars within our district. And let me tell you, sometimes it may not seem like a lot. Your input is valuable to us, and it really helps us as a board make sure we keep those direct student ties for students that represent large portions of our entire district and are the elected leaders within our schools as we're the elected leaders within the community. So I can't thank the SLAB students enough for all your participation and all your help. Now, I do want to open it up. You know, we always talk about student feedback, and we'd love to ask any of the SLAB students, and, you know, Evie, if you want to start it, or Evie and I, Genevieve and I have been talking, any of the students, what's the feedback for us about what virtual learning's been like these last 60 days, 70 days, whatever, 70 something days we've been doing this. So we'd love to hear some feedback of what you guys really like and what you think a change has come, because our district pivoted really fast and started going really fast. So we'd love any feedback the students have at this time.
I think that the student learning is going well, but I think that like personally for me, I don't think that I'm learning as much as I did in school, because it's not really like the teachers are doing their like what they can from like the internet, like using the internet and stuff. But I think that it's just people, like students aren't really learning anything because they're just getting the assignments done just to get them done for the credit, because since we took our GPAs and they were like, and since they were frozen, their grades aren't really affected by it. So I think that the students really just did the assignments to get it done and weren't really like learning, and they kind of, so I feel like maybe doing a grade system, if that's even possible with the online learning, maybe that could do, you know, make us kind of learn more than the material that's given, you know.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah,
I see you. Go ahead.
Personally, it's been a little bit of a struggle for me because, you know, I do love social interaction and my friends really motivate me during school. But overall, I usually get like assignments for each class a week, and then I just have to finish it once the week's over. So there's no really like connection with my teachers at all. I'm kind of missing that. And then also the GPA thing really got to me because, you know, I switched over mid-semester, and so did a lot of my friends, to more advanced classes. And so now we're not getting that credit. And so it's a little bit frustrating for sure.
No, that's a fair concern, and we've heard that numerous times from there.
Yeah.
Any other, and listen, we hear from everyone, I think students, and we hear from teachers, the lack of social interaction has probably been the hardest part for anyone. As much as, you know, it's funny, you know, we hear students talk about, you know, they all talk about not wanting to be in school, but then they have these times where they're not in school, and all we can hear from students is how much they wish they were back in school during these times. And our teachers, you hear sometimes, are always anxious for summer break, but all you can hear now is how much our teachers have missed our students during this time. So it's not surprising to hear the social interaction, and it's hard for everyone. I miss interacting on the social side with all my colleagues on all this. So it is a hard piece. Anything else from any of the students? Any feedback on anything else of this kind of different semester that we've all had to challenge and take on?
Maybe something to bounce off of what Izzy said. I feel like I think at school I got so involved because I wanted to form like more of a family at school, just so like along with my friends, you know, I can always count on people, and if I ever need anything, and like that's how I was the teachers. And yeah, I think that like it's just very different not being able to go to certain teachers that you kind of formed a very good relationship and bond with. You know, it's like it's different over the Zoom call, but I feel like more of interacting could really help some students. And I know that's very difficult to do at this time. But I just think that, I think y'all are doing, like the school board and district is doing a very good job. Just with something so unexpected happened, I think things are really good with how just things have kind of unfolded. But I think that it's just the really more of the social thing. Like it just will make, I feel like me having a more of a connection with kids at my school would make me want to do the work more. I think so too. Like just having that with my teachers and being able to like ask questions without having to email them. You know, it's very kind of difficult, but I think we're managing, and a lot of other people are managing.
Awesome. Thank you. And we hear it, and listen, we know you guys that are on this call with us, y'all are some of our high achievers. We know that, but we also know you hear from all the other students that are within your grade, and you have friends, and some that are really high achievers and some that may struggle a little bit. And so you hear that from across the board. And I thank you for your patience during this time of a pivot, and, you know, our staff and all the district, you know, think about the pivot we were all planning for you to come back from spring break. So the pivot the staff made in that month to be able to get that out, we really appreciate it. But that feedback, I see Dr. Wurtz, I see Dr. Buell, I see our team nodding as you guys talk. And so it's, the feedback is good, and we rely on surveys, we rely on student feedback, we rely on that critically. Let me just say thank you. We'll find a way. Luckily, you guys, we're working to try and get y'all back in the fall semester. We'll find another time to bring you up to our district, to the board meeting. And, you know, your official SLAB year is over, but, you know, you're a special SLAB group. So we'll find a time to bring you guys back and honor you with that. So let me just say thank you, and I'll open it up to my colleagues. If there's anything else from any of my colleagues, please take the time, or we'll move on to the next item of another Zoom call that you guys are having to learn through Zoom. We're having to officiate business through Zoom. So we'll all learn to do things a little differently now.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
Thank you all very much for being willing to come on and be very honest and very transparent. We do want y'all to know whether there's things that we have control over or the things that we don't for our students. We still want to hear how that's impacting you, because it does make a difference. And the way that our students are feeling, good, bad, and different, is information that's still very useful for the school district. So thank y'all very much for coming on, being honest, sharing your stories, and you're almost to the end of your school year. So we just really do appreciate y'all coming on and sharing your stories with us. Thank you. Any other colleagues have any other comments? No? Okay. So with that, thank you very much, Dr. Buell. Thank you very much, Mr. Hogg. Thank you once again to our SLAB students. We really appreciate you. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is administrative appointments. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And I'd like to recommend that the board ratify the appointment of the individuals discussed in closed session for principal of Beckham Elementary, principal of Wimbish World Language Academy, and assistant principal for Mary Moore Elementary.
I move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Mays, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, everybody disappeared. So I have not heard anything that was said since I said bye to the SLAB group. So technology, I apologize, Dr. Cavazos. I heard nothing, sorry.
Okay, I'll say it again.
Thank you.
I'd like to recommend that the board ratify the appointment of the individuals discussed in closed session for principal of Beckham Elementary, principal of Wimbish World Language Academy, and assistant principal for Mary Moore Elementary.
Sorry.
So do we have a motion to approve the ratification of the administrative appointments as discussed in executive session?
Move to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Dr. Reich, a second by Ms. Fowler. Any discussion? Since this meeting is being conducted virtually, our vote will be a roll call vote. Please state your name and your vote, either yes if you are in favor of the motion or no if you are not in favor of the motion. Mr. Chapa.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton. And you're muted.
Sorry. Polly Walton, and I vote yes.
Mr. Wilbanks.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg.
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Dr. Reich.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Motion passes.
Thank you, President Mays. And these individuals will join us at a future board meeting at some point, but I'll introduce them and their name tonight. For principal of Beckham Elementary, it's Karen Hicks. Karen attended Stephen F. Austin for Bachelor of Science, University of Phoenix for Master of Ed in Administration and Supervision. Most recently, an assistant principal at Bergen Elementary, has been an assistant principal at Grand Prairie ISD and a master teacher. Has also taught 5th grade, has been a reading coach, a physical education teacher, and a special education teacher. So Karen will be the new principal at Beckham Elementary. Next, the principal for Wimbish World Language Academy is Manuel Trevino. Manuel attended Southwestern Assemblies of God University and University of Texas at Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. Most recently was the interim principal at Wimbish World Language Academy, has been an assistant principal also at Corey Academy of Dual Language and Fine Arts, has been a 4th grade teacher and a 3rd grade bilingual teacher as well. Next, the assistant principal for Mary Moore Elementary is Margaret Minyard. Margaret attended the University of Texas at Arlington for Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, Sam Houston State University for Master of Library Science, and Stephen F. Austin University for Master in Ed Administration. Most recently, Margaret was the elementary librarian in Mansfield ISD, has also served as an elementary librarian in Arlington ISD and at Wood Elementary, has taught 5th grade, 2nd grade, 4th grade, and 1st grade in her career as well. So congratulations to these individuals as they start to transition to their positions, and we congratulate them, and we'll bring them to a future board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavazos. Now we come to our open forum for agenda items. I have been notified by Ms. Benjamin that we do not have any requesters registered to address the board regarding agenda items. So I will move on to the agenda. Next are our action items. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. This evening, we bring the consideration of the 2020-2021 Student Code of Conduct. The Board Governance Committee has met to review these items that were in our Code of Conduct. We've had a discussion at the last board meeting as part of that Code of Conduct recommendation. And tonight we bring it for the board's consideration.
Okay. Mr. Chapa.
Thank you, President Mays. This, as Dr. Cavazos said, this was a discussion item at our last board meeting. The changes this year are primarily legal in nature, a few minor changes in wordsmithing here or there. And then we also discussed some changes to extend our code of conduct to online learning in these unusual situations. And so that's what's coming back to the board tonight. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as chair of the governance committee. And if there are no questions at this time, I'd move that we adopt the code of conduct.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa.
I'll
Questions?
second the motion.
Okay, are there any questions? I'm assuming not. Dr. Rice, did you make a motion? Did you?
No, I was seconding Justin's.
Okay. Okay, so we had a motion by Ms. Walton?
No, Justin Chapa made the motion.
Okay,
I was seconding it.
okay. Going in and out, I assumed, and I assumed wrong. So Justin made the motion. Ms. Walton seconded the motion. Any
Yes.
discussion? Hearing none. Since this meeting is being conducted virtually, our vote will be a roll call vote. Please state your name and your vote, either yes if you are in favor of the motion or no if you are not in favor of the motion. Mr. Chapa.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton.
Polly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Wilbanks.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg.
Louis Hogg, I vote yes.
Dr. Reich.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chapa. Dr. Cavazos, our next action item.
Thank you, President Mays. And we bring for the board's consideration the hourly rate of pay authorized through the resolution approved March the 17th, 2020, as we look into the future of when the summer activities will start beginning regular in terms of work, not necessarily opening our buildings, but regular routine work. And we move out of this type of environment related to pay. So with this time, I'll open to any questions or a motion.
Are there any questions? Dr. Reich.
I don't have any questions, but I'm prepared to make the motion.
Okay, please.
Okay. So we have this in form of a resolution regarding the pandemic emergency pay. So whereas on March 17th, 2020, the Board of Trustees approved paying auxiliary and salary non-exempt employees who worked during the pandemic emergency a premium rate of 1 1/2 times their hourly rate of pay for all hours worked while schools were closed. And whereas the 1920 school year ends on or before May 29th, 2020, I move that all employee premium rate pay continue through and end on including May 29th, 2020.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So motion by Dr. Reich, second by Ms. Fowler. Any discussion? Okay, since this meeting is being conducted virtually, our vote will be a roll call vote. Please state your name and your vote, either yes if you are in favor of the motion or no if you are not in favor of the motion. Mr. Chapa.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Mrs. Walton.
Polly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Wilbanks.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg.
Louis Hogg, I vote yes.
Dr. Reich.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Motion passes. Thank you very much. That's our last action item. So next on the agenda are items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Are there any items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda this evening? Okay, seeing no hands. Tonight, we will be considering the items listed on your agenda under consent items. Mrs. Powell.
Good evening, President Mays, board members, Dr. Cavazos. We have one bid on the consent agenda this evening, and the administration recommends the low bid that represents the best value to the district.
Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay. So we have a motion by Dr. Reich, a second by Mr. Wilbanks. Since this meeting is being conducted virtually, our vote will be a roll call vote. Please state your name and your vote, either yes if you are in favor of the motion or no if you are not in favor of the motion. Mr. Chapa.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton.
Holly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Wilbanks.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg.
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Dr. Reich.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Consent agenda passes unanimously. Now we move on to our discussion items. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And our first discussion item is our 2020-2021 Board of Trustees meeting calendar. Ms. Benjamin and others have looked at the calendar, looked at the conflicts or potential conflicts, such as board required training, board trainings, graduations, and things like that for next year. So we bring it routinely as a discussion item. And at this time, we'll be happy to answer any questions. If there are specific considerations, by all means, we would review that. But this is in alignment with the activities that the board participates in normally in terms of conferences and required training and things like that.
Do I have any trustees with questions or discussion? Okay.
Very good. President Mays, we'll bring this back for action at the next board meeting. If there are in between now and the next board meeting any conflicts that anyone sees and things like that, by all means, let us know and we will continue to work on this calendar.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Next discussion item, our Pandemic Emergency Action Plan update. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And this is becoming a rather routine item in terms of providing an update because there is so much that that goes on between board meetings and as you all participate in our committees and things like that, there's a lot of activity and a lot of planning for closing out the year, for graduation, but also gearing up for how we open next year, implementation of state guidelines, federal guidelines, financial considerations, communication considerations. In between all that, we have transfers, we have pre-K registration that goes on. We'll have enrollment that happens in the summer normally, like it normally happens. We'll be providing online learning, finalizing grades and things like that. So very, very comprehensive work being done. What you'll hear tonight are, and it may not seem like highlights because there's a lot of detail, but it'll really be highlights of the work. We'll also have an opportunity to present some kind of thinking about the future and academic and instructional gaps that students have or will have as a result of closure. You heard tonight from some students about just the interaction that they're missing on a daily basis with not only their friends, but their teachers. And what I've said often is the most effective instruction is in the classroom with the teacher and frequent interaction for support and guidance and development and growth. Not that some of that can happen online, and a lot of it can, but there needs to be, I think, some interaction for that to be fully effective. And you heard some from our students tonight from that regard. So there's some recent information in terms of funding that the state is providing and things like that that you'll hear about tonight. I want to, before I turn it over to Cindy, who runs the kind of the slide deck, but also the presentation, I would like to take a moment to thank again our staff at all levels: teachers, paraprofessionals, custodians, security, maintenance, food services, administrators, principals, I'll just keep going, central office, senior staff, exceptional work being done in Arlington. And it does not go unnoticed by our community, that we get plenty of feedback. As you know, we get plenty of feedback during this time with everything that continues to unfold. But a big thank you to the organization and the team that's in the organization. It's exceptional. And the work is, in many ways, it's creating things. It's innovating, it's developing, and it's also maintaining and managing through this shutdown. So just a big thank you to the staff at all levels of the organization, and our students and our families for their patience as we continue to evolve in this situation. You'll hear tonight about a 6-page guideline that we received regarding summer instruction or summer meeting with students, for example, that was released this week. And so things are released almost daily, and that affects our work. But we have the right team and the exceptional team in Arlington ISD, and I'm very proud of them. So a thank you to them. And now I'll turn it over to Ms. Powell, and we'll guide through a presentation that includes a lot of different aspects of the organization. Ms. Powell.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. You framed that very, very well. And so we will just move right into our discussion. We do want to update you on a variety of topics. You will hear this evening from me and from Dr. Wurtz, also Dr. Hill and Dr. Barlow. And so each of us will just take up when we get to our respective sections of the presentation. An update on operations. We began actually today a process where students can come to our buildings and both drop off items, district-owned items, and then pick up their personal essential items. And we crafted a framework around this process, even with input from principals, and distributed that to the principals a week or so ago. It was important for us that we make sure that the plan, that the framework was just that. It was a framework, and that each school can develop their own specific plan within that framework. And then they've communicated that to their students and parents, and that process is beginning now. The reason you see the break in the dates there was simply around the Memorial Day weekend that we wanted to stay away from. The things that they're turning in are athletics, practice uniforms, fine arts instruments and uniforms, also textbooks, library books. In terms of the technology devices, though, we know that it's important for kids to have possession of those so they can continue their learning, their work this summer. And so we are encouraging students to hang on to devices. We will collect those in the fall as appropriate. We are focusing the effort on getting stuff regarding turning things in on those students who know they will be leaving us at the end of the year. They're seniors who are graduating, students who are moving away from the district. In terms of technology, otherwise we want students to hang on to what they have. And then, as I said, students can pick up personal items, essential personal items, and they are contacting the principals to make specific arrangements around that. We shared with you at the last meeting that we have a similar framework that pretty much overlaps in terms of time for staff coming back to their rooms and retrieving their personal items and cleaning out things that they may need to clean out. In terms of meal distribution, that work continues. We transitioned to a twice weekly distribution, and that has gone very well. We distribute meals each week on Monday and on Thursdays. When a family comes on a Monday, they receive 6 meals total, 3 breakfast meals, 3 lunch meals. Come back on Thursday, again, you get 6 meals, 3 breakfast meals, 3 lunch meals. So over the course of those 2 days, you will receive a total of 12 meals. Through today's service period, we've served over 1.3 million meals. So For next week, including Memorial Day, we will continue on our same distribution schedule, 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock on both those dates. And again, we will be open and serving food on Monday, Memorial Day. Starting the following week, we move to what truly is our summer feeding program that we have every year. We are shifting the time a little bit because of the heat. We know that the further we go into the summer months, the hotter it will become. And so we're shifting that just a little bit. We will continue that distribution again, Mondays and Thursdays. The same applies each time you come on Monday or also on Thursday. The parent will receive a total of 6 meals for their child, 3 breakfast meals and 3 lunch meals. So a total of 6 days worth of food distributed on each of those dates. These sites are listed on our website. We will be changing a little bit the particular location serving beginning June 1, and that's for several reasons. One is one of those reasons has to do with the staffing available to us. Number 2, our own summer bond work and maintenance work that was already scheduled for some sites. And then even an adjustment on one site for street construction that the city was going to be conducting outside the front of the school. So anyone interested in knowing where they can come to receive a meal can go to our website at the address you see here. In terms of school finance, Dr. Cavazos mentioned this this afternoon at 3 o'clock is how recent this information is. TEA held a briefing and the Commissioner of Education, Mike Morath, went through some information that TEA released just this afternoon on school finance. And so there's a lot of detail here for us to digest. And we are doing that even since 3 o'clock. We've been working at this and reading some of the information provided, but I can give you a very, very high level overview here. The commissioner made several broad points. The first being that districts would be held harmless to House Bill 3 provisions this year and next year, meaning that our state aid would be held constant in terms of the formulas themselves, okay? Secondly, he wanted us to know that the state of Texas is creating a second program with additional CARES funding to reimburse school districts up to 75% of eligible COVID-related expenses that have been incurred through May 21st. Okay, and actually that should be through yesterday, May 20th. Another point he made very strongly was encouraging districts to be conservative as we look forward to next year. The point he made today and that he has made previously is that the state of Texas is in a recession itself, and these legislature will have a very difficult task ahead of it when they meet next spring to develop the following biennial budget. And so we were encouraged repeatedly to be very cautious and conservative in our planning for next year. So what you see here are 3 broad buckets of funding, if you will, that the commissioner discussed today. The first one on the far left, the ESSER funding, that stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. This is the big bucket, if you will, of CARES funding that the federal government has allocated to the states for public education. That funding is, according to Congress, is to be distributed to school districts. 90% of what goes to the state is to be funded to school districts, and it is allocated to districts proportionate to Title I allocation compared to the statewide Title I allocations. The calculations show that Arlington ISD has an entitlement of $14.7 million of this funding. We're going to talk about that more in just a moment to explain that. It will require that we file an application. That application will be issued in June, and costs that we have incurred beginning March 13th through the current period are eligible for reimbursement through this program. There's no supplement versus supplant requirement like we have on a number of federal grants. And the funds will be accounted for in the year in which expenditures actually incurred. So even though we may not have our grant application approved until June, we have costs incurred in the 2019-2020 year dating back to March 13th that we can reclassify in our general ledger over to this funding. We will be, all school districts will be required to offer services to private nonprofit schools. This is very consistent with Title I grants and other Title grants. So that is a provision of this funding. What we've learned even since the meeting this afternoon is that the state will actually offset our state aid with this funding. So essentially, it's very much like we had previously been expecting, that they will, in effect, hold us harmless. We'll get all the state aid that we were entitled to for a full operating year, but they will use this money to deliver that to us effectively. There is a second fund that we learned about today, and it is entitled the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The state has set this up out of funds that they received from, again, the CARES Act, but it was from the U.S. Treasury Department's bucket of money. And this fund, that bucket of money sent monies to all of the states for them to use at their level. And the state of Texas has chosen to carve out $392 million of that money and dedicate it for reimbursement of incremental costs that school districts have incurred, again, since the pandemic declaration was made in March. So this is beyond the funding that we just talked about, the ESSER funding. And this will work a little bit like the FEMA funding. This funding will reimburse us for 75% of any eligible incremental cost that we have incurred through yesterday's date, that May 20th date. And you have to apply for this funding. Once the state receives all of the applications from the state, they will tally up the funding. And if the total claims exceed that $392 million, then the state will basically prorate everyone's allowable reimbursement through the funds. The funding will be a minimum of $50,000 up to a cap of $250 per student eligible for state comp ed. And so again, there will be some particular expenditures that we'll be able to claim as terms of reimbursement. And this does have a supplement versus supplant requirement. We can only claim for reimbursement additional incremental cost that we have incurred because of the COVID-19 shutdown. And that includes things even like technology and cost to deliver the online instructional program. The last bucket that the commissioner covered is the FEMA money. And we've talked about that before in one of these meetings. Nothing has really changed there. This is money that is administered by FEMA through the Texas Department of Emergency Management. And there's a very narrow definition of what qualifies for reimbursements here, and it will focus largely on cleaning supplies and sanitation cost. And again, there's the 75% reimbursement cap you see here. We would be reimbursed for up to 75% of any eligible expenditures that we claim. The one thing the commissioner did tell us today about this this funding source is that TEA is working with FEMA and with the Texas Department of Emergency Management to try to streamline that claims process. We've been through that FEMA process back in, I guess it was 2005, after one of the hurricanes, Hurricane Katrina. And it is a very laborious process and very extensive reporting required. So I think everyone was grateful that the commissioner said that they are working with FEMA and with Texas Department of Emergency Management to try to streamline that process. Again, I think before I turn this to Dr. Wurtz, I'll just remind everybody that this information will continue to come to us, and we'll continue to process that and report back to you all and determine how this impacts our budget work for next year and what we present forward to the board in June. And we have a lot yet to learn about these funding sources and how we can utilize them and claim them for reimbursement. So with that, now I will turn this to Dr. Wurtz.
Cindy, could I ask one question? Ms.
Absolutely.
Powell? Ms. Powell, I was just curious, when you were talking to us about students bringing back instruments and band uniforms and books and such, is there any concern that maybe we need to do a deep cleaning or something with these things before bringing them back into the school?
So that was part of our protocols that we've developed. And we'll start with instruments. We have the Fine Arts Department and then also athletics. The athletics department has put out procedures to their respective faculty members about how to take those instruments in, that athletic equipment or uniforms in. We will let them sit for a period of time, and then we'll be cleaning those things appropriately. So yes, we recognize that need.
All right, thank you.
Our custodial staff is on duty at the schools, fully on staff at the schools, and we will be cleaning the schools again each night and throughout the day as this work takes place. We've encouraged the schools to have the kids stay outside the building as much as possible, do as much of this curbside and at, say, the door of the MAC or an entrance to a fine arts area, so that the kids are not even coming into the buildings. And so our staff will bring the equipment in and place it into the band hall or into the athletics area. We'll let it sit for an appropriate period of time. We'll clean the spaces throughout the day and overnight, and then after all this effort is finished.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Ms. Powell?
Yes.
I wanted to get a little bit more information on the application that we'd be submitting for our part of that, the state's allocation at $392 million. What is that timeline again, as far as?
So there's really two different timelines. It depends on which I think the one you're asking about is that coronavirus relief fund. Okay, that one, what I've read even since that 3 o'clock meeting is that application will be posted about July 20th.
Okay.
Okay. And in the other one, the ESSER funding, that application will be posted in June. Okay.
So we won't be able to utilize any of that data in our budget preparation process as we move forward. We'll just have to consider that separately at a later date then, correct?
Well, I think to some degree, yes. I think we still have a lot of details to understand around all of it. The ESSER funds we'll be able to go back into the 2019-2020 general ledger and reclassify expenditures that have already hit to that fund, and that in effect frees up dollars in the general fund, and that difference then would close to fund balance and could be part of our discussions as we build next year's budget. The relief fund will be a much smaller amount, but I think to your point, going forward, we certainly, as you're going to hear in just a minute, we don't know, no one does really, what all we will run into in the upcoming year, we may still have a need for a very robust and significant online instructional program. And our understanding is that Coronavirus Relief Fund, that's one of the eligible costs for reimbursement through that fund. So we very likely will have expenditures next year that will qualify for reimbursement through that relief fund. We would not budget this until we have the grant award. That's consistent with any grant that we get, like a Title I or a special ed. When we don't bring those to the board for budget purposes until we have been notified that we've been awarded the grant. And we do the same thing with this.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's ever changing. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Wurtz.
All right, good evening, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. I'm going to provide an update this evening about some of the work we're focusing on right now, which is now moving in towards phase 4 as we close the school year. The phase 4 area of our work really focuses on gap closure. We know that there were gaps that were generated during this time of closure that students have experienced from instruction. I think some of the students that we talked to this evening alluded to some of those things even in their own comments. And so our goal over the summertime is to help minimize some of those gaps and also to prep for the future school year. So you have seen the slide before, and I just wanted to remind you and the public of which programs we're going to be offering this summer. And the first I want to focus on is the virtual programming. We'll be offering virtual school programming for our bilingual education students, kinder through first grade. And that will, we will be providing backpacks to potentially 1,000 students with all the lessons and works that they will be able to do at home, and also have opportunities for their teachers to engage with them in a virtual environment to help them as they progress through that work. We'll also be providing continual support to our students in kinder through sixth grade, leveraging the same platforms that they've had in a virtual environment during the school year, namely Seesaw for grades K through 2, and then 3 through 6 would be through Canvas. In junior high, we're offering a grade recovery in grades 7 through 8, and this will be managed through our Edgenuity coursework. Edgenuity is an online platform that allows students to recover grades or credit, and it functions very much similar to Canvas. It's an online environment that has modules and tasks and assignments and tests that kids can participate in to refine their learning. In high school, we'll hold 2 sessions. We'll have a session, but one of our sessions will include, both sessions will include credit recovery, but we'll also be offering acceleration, which are courses that students will take for first-time credit. We'll have CTE courses that are available and dual credit, and these are all tuition-based. And then any students that need to participate in credit recovery, that will be tuition-free, and students will be able to participate in 2 different platforms. One would be through Canvas coursework, and the other would be through Edgenuity. And when I say Canvas coursework, what I'm basically referring to is an opportunity for kids who are in the grade recovery process right now with their teachers. If for some reason a student earned an incomplete sometime during this semester, and they did not recover that before the end of the school year, a teacher can persist with them for a certain number of days to recover that grade. Which would prevent them from having to go into what we would call a credit recovery process. If for some reason that incomplete is not recovered, then the student would enroll in Edgenuity and recover that credit on Edgenuity. Of course, our primary focus right now in high school, we're going to offer all of the things that we normally do. We're really hyper-focusing on students who participated in courses that are connected to an end-of-course exam. TEA has waived the end-of-course requirement for courses that students participate with an end-of-course exam attached to it this year if they receive credit for the course. So we're working diligently throughout this summer to ensure that if a student participated in a course during this semester or this school year, where they normally would have had to take an end-of-course, STAR end-of-course exam, we're going to work diligently to try to help those kids earn credit, because for every credit that is earned in those courses, they are exempt from the EOC and they will not have to take it in the future. A student who does not receive credit for a course where an EOC is attached during the school year will have to make up that course in a credit recovery environment during the next school year and will be required to participate in the EOC. So we're trying to help our kids leverage the opportunity that TA provided. The other opportunity that we will have available is we will be taking advantage or opportunities of the at-home learning packets that are being provided by TEA. These are being distributed, including authentic literature for kids to have opportunities to read at home through an online environment. So we will post these resources online for families to access, even if they're not going to extended school year or summer school. We know many families will probably want to have their kids engaged over the summer, especially in an environment where they may not be able to normally be outside and do the things they normally would want to do. And so we will make those items available for all families on top of the summer program that we're offering our students. This is just a quick slide that kind of refreshes everyone's memory about what the at-home learning 2.0 is, which is basically these learning packets that will be available on the at-home learning hub for families. They are lessons and lesson plans that are shortened schedules that are about 4 weeks long, and they are organized by subjects and they are simplified so that parents have easy access and can use them. As a school district, we're going to try to adapt those in our platform into smaller chunks so that families can leverage those in a way that they see as most appropriate for their family. These are the dates that extended school year will be offered for virtual programs. And you can see these are the same dates that I provided in the last board meeting. And I want to just highlight high school, where we'll offer session 1 and session 2. Some of the things that we are currently planning for is some face-to-face summer programming. As Ms. Powell mentioned in her portion of the presentation, we received some guidance from the state recently, and one of the guidance documents that we received were how to provide limited face-to-face learning opportunities for our most at-risk students. And so we are working towards putting protocol and programming together that we could offer students in the summer, specifically at the Career Tech Center. So we have students that are participating in CTE coursework that are connected to certifications and specialized equipment that cannot be done at home. And so we are currently working to design a program that would allow students to maintain their safety following the state's protocol, but also participate in coursework where they can utilize the specialized equipment and software and participate in these cert exams. And also we recognize that some students who may have not received credit on an end of course subject area where an end of course exam was connected, they may not do very well in an online environment. And so we will be providing some limited face-to-face instruction for our courses that are directly connected to the STAR end of course exams also in the summer. So those are in development, and we'll be able to have more details once we have those dates and everything worked out. I also wanted to share some information, which I know everyone's excited about, is when we announced our graduations. Graduation ceremonies for our seniors this year will be taking place at the AT&T Stadium. And our focus around providing graduation in this environment is to really take an opportunity to celebrate our seniors. We know how discouraging it is for seniors who have worked their entire life to walk the stage and to celebrate with their family and friends. And the idea of a virtual environment was really not ideal. As you know from a previous meeting, Dr. Cavazos indicated we had surveyed our seniors. We had worked with our student leaders to ask their opinions about how they would want to celebrate and what kind of graduation would be ideal for them. And of course, their number one desire was to have a face-to-face graduation, even if it had to be delayed. And when we received guidance from the state allowing face-to-face graduations with specific protocols in place in an outdoor environment, we decided to take advantage of that opportunity to try to meet our students' desires and needs. And we will be hosting those at the AT&T Stadium. We're also going to be working to ensure that the safety and well-being is really in place for all the participants, both the graduates and the families and friends who are participating. There are guidelines that we received from the state, which articulates specifically how tickets are distributed, how social distancing is to occur, temperature checks, and all of the normal protocol that we're very familiar with these days in the stadium to ensure that our families and the kids that are graduating are safe while they're there. And so we will work to implement those with fidelity and in a friendly, customer-friendly way so that we can enjoy the day and the kids can feel positive and have a great experience in spite of these extra steps that we'll have to take in that new environment. So this is the schedule. These are the dates at which each high school will have their graduation and the times in which they'll take place. These are also posted on the website. So we'll go to the next slide. If you go to the website, there's a website where we have graduation information available. And on that website, we provide frequently asked questions regarding how many tickets each graduate would get. We share information about the graduation gear, where they can put hashtags on their social media about their graduation, and pretty much all things pertaining to graduation. So this is at www.aisd.net/graduation, and you can see the tabs on the left-hand side, which will explicitly explain to parents our safety protocols, general information, and even for family members who are not able to participate due to the number of tickets, they can also watch online and celebrate with their graduate in that way. So now I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Hill, and he'll be sharing some more information about some of the operational areas that we're considering as we think about summer programming and potential operations and moving into the fall.
Okay, and so thank you, Dr. Wurtz. Good evening, Dr. Cavazos, President Mays, and the board. I'm here to just kind of share a little bit about the summer instructional planning and just operational thoughts and plannings for the next school year. So what we started with is basically developing a task force, and developing a goal with that task force is to work collaboratively to look at all the aspects of what it would look like to come back to school next year. As a result of all of the stipulations that are associated with COVID-19. And so that task force has probably had 1 or 2 meetings that consist of, or will consist of campus staff and their input, district level staff, again, local and state guidance, and running all of this through the eyes of the attorney to make sure that we are legal in all that we're doing here. The focus areas of the task force include, as Dr. Wurtz mentioned, curriculum and instruction, just campus operations. How do you operationalize that 6-page document that Dr. Cavazos mentioned earlier? From the campus, how do you operationalize it from the district? Food and nutrition services, how do you feed kids? What does this look like for extracurricular and athletics? What does it look like for the community? And we've got a strong volunteer base, and what does that look like for them coming forward next year? What does it look like through the lens of technology? What does it look like through the lens of our human capital, our teachers, our staff, our others that have to come back to work? And then basically the last thing we're looking at is, with all of these guidelines that have been presented to us, we're gonna try some soft launches this summer with smaller groups to see if we can implement those guidelines on a smaller scale as we scale up for next year. Some of the things from the instructional, or just basically from those areas of focus, is scope and sequence. Does that change? Does our delivery model change? What does that look like? What are the class size implications? Do we have a blended model where we have some in-person and some remote learning? How does this impact transportation? Do we run our buses? Do we run earlier, more routes because of the requirements of fewer kids on the bus? What impact does it have on cleaning of our facilities, of our buses, of the cafeterias, of the locker rooms, and all of this? Again, how does it impact feeding students? What about staff concerns and parent concerns? And so all of these things are what the task force is going to be charged with looking at. Again, TEA has provided that 6-page document, and again, we do anticipate those updates coming very regular. The big pillars in that document include public health, the delivery model, health and hygiene, and symptoms and screening as we prepare for next year. Again, Dr. Wurtz mentioned earlier, they've given the clearance for June 1 in-school instruction that is allowable with certain requirements. although they do allow that, the most of our summer school, EY, is going to be remote and online learning. But again, we will attempt to come in with smaller groups and train staff on safety protocols, what the instructional protocols look like on space, on number of kids in the classroom. Some of the guidance is saying that assemblies and field trips are prohibited. Giving even more guidance about choir, indoor sports, and playing of wind instruments. And so the guidance from TEA is pretty specific and pretty robust at this time. More guidance that talks about staff screening before they come to school, student screening, taking temperature for students, having hand sanitizers at every entrance and in every classroom. And again, encouraging the good hand washing techniques and encouraging that regularly. May require staff to wear face masks, may require developmentally appropriate students to wear a face covering as well. Where possible, there is guidance on putting dividers between students and staff so we can continue the efforts to protect and social distance, more frequent cleaning, guidance on if and when a COVID case is identified on campus, what are our protocols to do that, to address that. Regarding some of the transportation guidelines, we're talking about limiting the number of routes, hand sanitizers on all the buses, social distancing on the buses, encouraging parents to drop off versus having kids to ride the bus, and then thoroughly cleaning school buses after every trip. Other plans that TEA is recommending through this 6-page document are entry and exit procedures actually into the building. Again, parent visits to the schools. How do we feed kids? What about play spaces, interior play spaces and playgrounds? What about play guidance for students with disabilities and their play areas? Planning for increased attrition in staff and increased student and staff illness, and how would we be prepared for that? And so this task force is taking this 6-page guidance and all these previous slides, and we're drafting different from the task force, but we are drafting a summer calendar to consider what it would look like to implement all of those practices on a very smaller scale in the summer so that we can work out the kinks and be ready for August and whatever that may bring. We're looking at a phased opening of the campuses and district facilities over the summer. Very limited and controlled summer programs in select schools, and those programs could be academic programming, extracurricular programming, tail-pass testing as an example, the summer feeding that Ms. Powell mentioned earlier, and then just fall registration and any other opportunities by appointment that we may be able to take advantage of and kind of get this thing again on a smaller scale and then kind of scale it up as necessary. So that will cover the initial part about summer instruction and school operations for 2020-21. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Barlow at this point.
Okay, good evening, President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just trying to talk about how we're trying to understand the impact of the closure, how we're trying to get a little bit of feedback from our community, and so forth. And so first we'll talk a little bit about the survey that we are about to deploy. So we've got a survey with respect to asking some parents questions, teachers questions, and also students that will be deployed this week, probably later tonight or in the morning. We're still doing a little bit of work on some of the Spanish translation. But the major concepts that we're trying to cover there are with respect to experience with current campus closures. So an example of that might be, I was successful knowing how to use the at-home learning hub. So that might be a parent question, like a strongly disagree to strongly agree. Also trying to gain a little bit of information about concerns with respect to return to school. So an example like that we may ask, or that we've got in the works there, is knowing classrooms and other areas on the campus are clean, sanitized daily is important to me. So strongly disagree to strongly agree. So trying to understand what's important to parents as they plan for their children to go back to school for the next school year. So I want to spend a little bit of time on data and data interpretation. And so probably the one thing I can guarantee you from a statistical point of view is that whatever data we look at next year, it will not be the same type of data that we look at next year. It's going to be very, very difficult to compare that. So the example that I have here is interpreting data is often a challenge. So for example, in a 2-car race, if you'll look there, it looks like car 39 is advancing and winning, crossing the finish line there before car 38. So one way to interpret that is that car 39 was in first place, car 38 was in last place. But another way to interpret that is that car 39 was in next to last and car 38 was in second place. So a lot of times data is perspective, and trying to understand it makes a big difference as far as interpreting. So another couple of examples when I do sessions on standard setting, I use these 2 examples. They usually have a lot of meaning, it seems like. So the examples here is Texas schools typically use a 70% as passing for coursework. However, without context, what does a 70% mean? I've actually done research on where the 70% came up on with respect to Texas schools, using that as a passing standard. And I can't really find a definitive answer on how that came to be, but if I apply that to other contexts, so for example, in baseball, what if you set a criteria of only drafting players that could bat a 700, or that would be basically a 70%, right? That doesn't fit in that context because you're usually looking about a 300 or even top score is probably a 400. Or maybe on the other extreme, if I was flying to London, would you board a plane with a pilot who could only land the plane on the runway 70% of the time? So our standards, we have to look at our context with respect to how we set standards in any sort of setting. So basically the takeaway there is that context matters. So can assessment standards be adjusted for 2021? Well, yes, we can do that psychometrically and we can make the numbers work, but that just becomes math, not necessarily interpretable data. So here's the point that I kind of started off with, is that whatever we do with those standards or the state does with those standards with respect to passing, we can adjust those and make those try to look similar or look like this year. However, the one thing I can guarantee you is that whatever standards we have next year is going to be difficult to interpret those data with respect to this year and last year. So basically 90% of students passing in 2021, whatever that may look like, that will not mean the same thing as 90% of students passing in 2019, which would have been last year, with respect to the last time we would have given STAR or had an accountability system. So context matters. So some of the current research, we've already seen some research come out on what happens when you close schools. This is a graph that TEA presented. I think this is some research by some universities. Basically, the way this looks is, if you, first of all, a little context or framework, is that mathematics is on the left side, reading is on the right side. So typically, there's a lot of research that indicates as students go through the school year, they gain achievement, they grow in their academics. But then when you get to that last day of school, so you maybe, hopefully you can see that dotted line there that says the last day of school. When they get to that last day of school, there's that summer slide where you start losing some of that achievement. Students forget things, you come back to school the next year, you have to do a little bit of refresher, that type of thing. So if you look at that slide there on that last day of school, we see that trend. This has been in previous years, really doesn't have anything to do with the closure right now. This is a normal thing that we see every year. So you see that slide a little bit during the summer, but now if you go back and you look at when the school closed back in March, we would expect to see a similar, or at least somewhat of a slide starting back in March. And so if you see that another dotted line there, each from March all the way to the beginning of the school year there in September 1, then you can see that decline in academic achievement. One note there is that each one of those lines is a grade level. So just pick a grade level and kind of concentrate on that. I'm going to use that third grade math there on the left side. I think that's the one that's most pronounced. But if you go to the next slide, then I think we'll have a little bit of an example here. So what we'd want to concentrate on is, again, I'm using that third grade math on the left side, is that normal slide, so that solid line that starts to decline at the typical last day. That's what we would typically see during the summer and as we begin in September. But now you see school closure in March, And you'll see that what we would expect to see is a decline probably from March to some degree all the way through summer. So you can see that gap. The one thing I'd note on the graph on the right with respect to reading, and this is also in some of the other research in the slides that I'll show in a minute, is that this seems to affect both math and reading, but math is a little bit more pronounced. So you'll see on the right side, that same graph on the right side with respect to reading, the decline doesn't seem to be quite as pronounced, but there is a decline there. Let's go to the next slide. So some of the impacts, again, some of the studies with respect to school closures, we know a little bit about school closures because we've experienced this with Katrina, Rita, and then just most recently, Harvey. So there have been people doing research on those effects. In Katrina 2005, some of the research they found was that lower math scores or lower math growth. Not so much in reading, but certainly there's other research that says reading is affected. More likely to have behavioral issues and drop out of school. In Harvey, the same similar results. However, you do see more of a decline in the reading. For the 2018 scale score gains were 7.8% lower in reading and then 21.6% lower in math. Again, kind of accenting that it affects both, but it seems to be a little bit more pronounced in math. This is some anticipated research. DC school districts and Washington, DC have already started anticipating what their instructional loss is going to be with respect to school closure this year. And based on their models, what they're looking at is with math, with every day of lost instruction, the probability a student meets annual growth expectation is going to drop about 1%. And then with reading for every 3 days, they expect it to drop about 2%. So what adjustments have been made over the past with respect to school closures? Again, going back to Hurricane Katrina and Rita. So when we get into the accountability process, during the last episodes of hurricanes anyway, that's what we can use as examples, and historically, is that there have been some rules that have changed in accountability. I think the question right now would be, are those, if you made similar changes, would those changes be enough to have some sort of meaning from one year to the next? So in Katrina, students displaced due to Hurricane Katrina and Rita will be removed from the accountability data. That was a statement out of the accountability manual, and they did do that, TEA did. On that second bullet, a district may appeal to include the prior year performance of students who were excluded. That's an example. It seems a little bit counterintuitive, but that did have an effect with respect to students who were low performing one year and that growth that you saw the next year. Those aren't necessarily details that I want to get into, except just using those as examples of exceptions that have been made in the past. Hurricane Harvey, again, campus will be labeled not rated. Districts will be rated as be labeled as not rated. And then that last statement there, that for purposes of counting consecutive years of ratings, 2017 and 19 will be considered consecutive. So again, we don't know how that applies to right now. The purpose of those slides was just to show that there's been exceptions made in accountability over the last several years. So now talk a little bit, we'll talk just briefly, maybe one slide here about what we're trying to research and predict with respect to Arlington schools. So this becomes quite challenging because we don't really have good data to actually look at right now with students. But what we did was we went back to look at last year's data. And what's interesting is our benchmark that we give usually falls around that March time period. So we felt like that was a pretty good measure of, hey, this is what students would know around the March time period, and to compare that to what happens at the end of the school year. So if we look at our benchmark, which is really a released STAR test, and we score this the same way that you would do STAR. We make some adjustments when we actually do our predictive models on the data wall, but on these, we just scored all of these the same way STAR would be scored. And so I think we're just going to concentrate just for a moment on that approaches column. We're not going to get so much in the meets and masters. So it's the third column from the right. In the first grouping of scores there, that would be your reading scores for all students. And you'll notice that there's about a 3% gap between benchmark and STAR when you take the benchmark in March and you take the STAR in May. And so what we would anticipate is that there would be at least a 3% slide with respect to school closure this year. If you look at the economically disadvantaged, one note there is that they typically perform lower to begin with, and you can see that in these data. Again, about a 3-point slide or difference between the March time period and the end of school. If you go to, so that was the reading. If you drop down to the math, see similar trends where, again, looking at that approaches, the 64% there in the March time period, about a 4 or 5, almost a 5-point difference there when you get to the end of May when we do, or the May time period when we do STAR, and then similar results for economic disadvantage. So the takeaway there is there's a gap between March and the end of the year for all students. Sometimes it's a little bit more pronounced with economic disadvantaged students, and certainly economic disadvantaged students have challenges with respect to the test scores anyway versus the all student. Again, a little bit more pronounced for math than it is for reading. So when we look at the accountability gaps that we may experience for next year, is if you're just looking at the way the accountability system is set up right now. So that's what we're trying to gauge here is we have an accountability system. If we go forward and we do testing and we do accountability and so forth, all of that next year, what does it look like and how would that be adjusted? So right now, academic growth will not be able to be calculated because we won't have a score for this year. So that's something that's going to be missing out of the accountability system next year. Academic growth accounts for 50% of an elementary or junior high campuses closing the GAPS domain score. So it's a huge part of that score on that domain 3. Again, on the CCMR, 2020 graduates, so those are the current graduates, which would go into next year's accountability system. They're going to have a lot of missed opportunities with respect to PSI scores, SAT scores, ACT scores, et cetera. And the same thing with the IB classes and the IB tests. So if you have an accountability system next year, you have 2 choices. One is to use what we've been using, which we've just noticed some of the gaps there, or you would have to build a new one. Well, it takes time to build a new accountability system. Some of the things that have to happen is first TEA has to construct the accountability system, and that's even if that's allowable through the legislature, because that's governed by the legislature, but that takes time. Once it's built, or at least you have a framework, then it has to go through various committees. So it has to go through the ATAC committee, the APAC committee. You also have to do a posting for public feedback. All of those are required by the process, especially the posting for public feedback is required by law. Also, new accountability systems usually go through some sort of phased-in process. We saw that in 2012 when we moved over from TAX to STAR. New ratings were assigned as the new system was being phased in. And then we saw that again in 2018 when we went to the letter grade system, where the first year out, only districts were assigned letter grades and not campuses. So how would we actually have a phased in system would be a question that we might ask ourselves. And then I want to spend just a minute kind of delineating or teasing out a little bit the difference between assessment and accountability. In the public, we use these terms quite interchangeably, and there's a very big difference between assessment and accountability. So I've got a chart here. We use this chart quite a bit in our office when we're doing presentations and so forth. So I'm going to spend just a minute on it. Is that, first of all, we just look at types of measures. We have all kinds of measures. Those can be multiple choice tests, performance-based tests, writing assignments, grade, class grades, portfolios, observations, just a myriad of types of measures. When we take those types of measures, we have 2 ways to standardize those. We can have a very objective standardization or a very subjective standardization. So you notice there, the objective part, those are usually like multiple choice tests or rubrics, all the ways to subjective parts, which is more where there's no standardization between teachers grading papers, that type of thing. So a little bit more subjective. Both have their purposes. Usually when we're talking about accountability systems, we use the objective part. Again, those are all measures and then data that goes with those types of measures. The challenge that that we come into is when we turn all of that stuff into high stakes. And high stakes comes in when we start talking about school ratings, graduation, promotion, that type of thing. So high stakes, the consequences, there's some sort of consequence that goes with it, or low stakes, there would be no consequence that goes with it. So sometimes we use these terms interchangeably, but maybe as we're having this conversation and we're talking about STAR next year or not STAR, or accountability next year or not accountability next year, it's very feasible to have testing and to have data and to not have high stakes and have that pressure that goes with those high stakes, or vice versa. So it's just a way to look at that with respect to kind of teasing that out a little bit. And I think, go to the next slide. I don't think I have, yeah. So that was my last slide, unless you have questions.
I don't have a question for Mr. Barlow, but I have one if Mr. Hill or Dr. Hill's still around.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
So back on your slides, when you were talking about operationally how you would have to prepare for the physical buildings, and you talked about testing the interaction of parents coming up to class. Has there been a lot of thought of, I know some districts are building plexiglass screens for any point of contact between parent and the front office. Are we looking at doing the same thing for our campuses?
Yes, we are. We're having those conversations, and actually Ms. Powell may be able to speak to it, but her team has actually got some samples that we've ordered and trying to make sure that they're fitting right and that we can get them in time to basically set that up at every appropriate location in every building.
And Dr. Hill answered that very well. We have ordered a handful of samples from a local vendor, and we've actually, I think even yesterday, placed a larger order for what we think is kind of the most basic size that we'll need, at least to get started with some of the summer rollout. And so, yes, we've been working to identify what that might need to look like. And I think there are several different combinations and different sizes, different configurations that we may need in different places. And so we've tried to order a variety of those.
Yeah, every school's different, right?
Right.
Any other questions from trustees? Yes, Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Mays. So first off, I have questions for Dr. Barlow, but I did want to make just a couple of comments. Basically, gratitude, thank you, Dr. Wurtz, Dr. Hill, Ms. Powell, everybody really. The work that you all are doing is just phenomenal. And relative to these, this presentation, Dr. Wurtz, Dr. Hill, I know you guys are tired and you have to keep on going, and there's just more getting thrown at you every single minute of every single day. I really appreciate the not just your work and the efforts, but the what I feel is a very comprehensive approach of what you're doing to address everything regarding our students and their academic achievement on the academic side, and then Dr. Hill on the operations side. These are no small tasks. So if there was ever a time to notate to the public, to our legislature, state and federally, the ability and the innovation ability for public school districts, and the ability to respond and pivot like nothing ever before. Now is certainly that time to let everybody know. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Could go on and on about that. It's just remarkable, the layer upon layer upon layer that we're having to assess everything on all fronts. So my questions for Dr. Barlow. So very interesting information that you've presented, and it's not a surprise, I don't think, to anybody on this board that there is certainly a slip, will be a slip when we can actually measure things, as you very well pointed out, that there's no real baseline here. So it's a complete up in the air moving target. With all of that said, obviously moving forward into next year, accountability is a huge question mark. Have you heard, or what have you heard from at the state level regarding next year, regarding testing? Is there going to be a moratorium? What are they discussing right now?
So everything we've heard so far is that everything's moving forward just as is. I know on the commissioner's call this afternoon, he was talking about longer windows for testing, that type of thing. In other words, it's like, okay, we're going to go ahead and move forward with testing. We're just going to make the window for testing wider, that type of thing. We haven't heard anything with respect to accountability changes. However, I do sit on that ATAC committee, that one committee that I've mentioned on one of the slides there, and we have a meeting, I think it's June 8th or 9th, I'm trying to remember the date. I think I'll know more after that meeting. So I'm sure that this will be a hot topic of debate during that time.
Okay, yeah, I know it will be. It's really surprising to me that they, at this point anyway, are maybe hopeful moving forward, business as usual, with the exception of increasing the duration just because of absentees, distancing, etc. But that's the operations side of it. That has nothing to do with the achievement and truly an accountability measure. So I look very forward to hearing more conversation on that, because it just seems completely unrealistic at this point in time. There's so much fluidity and so many changes that are going to impact our students, our families, our teachers, everybody, just trying to figure out what we're doing operationally at the beginning of the year. And that's starting school, and then through those first few months of adjustment and understanding what this is and how well this new model works. And certainly our teachers and our students are going to be engaged in learning as fast and furious as possible, but to not account for all of that adjustment and to not address the regression that we are surely experiencing that you've just brought up, and that is just, it's absolutely, I'll just say inappropriate, but I could think of a lot more stronger words. Okay. So you said June 6th, 8th, something like that?
June 8th or 9th. There's two sessions. I think mine's on June 8th. They've kind of split us up into groups, and I think mine's on June 8th.
Okay. And so I'm just curious about how that is structured. Is that based on similar districts, size of districts, or demographic makeup of districts? How does that look?
So sure. So there's a wide variety of representatives on the ATAC. So there's about 20, maybe 25 of us, kind of fluctuates. There's some people from the Houston area, not just necessarily just Houston School District, but that area, Spring Branch and so forth. There's a rep from Plano, San Antonio, El Paso, and then there's also, and those are people in similar positions as me. But then there's also some service center representatives there. There's a couple of superintendents. I'm trying to think where they're from, but so it is a variety of people. There's about 20 or 25 of us. Okay. So typically what they do is they'll be working on a model, and then they'll bring it to us for feedback. And that's just purely feedback. We have made our opinions known that, hey, this feels like it's just feedback going up against a brick wall sometimes, but but they do ask for the feedback, and it's a pretty vocal group. I mean, there's no holding back. I mean, it's pretty vocal. We have seen sometimes where there has been some changes. One example would be a few years back when they were trying to eliminate the CTE credit for the accountability system, we did talk them into kind of staggering that or phasing that out instead of just an abrupt stoppage of it. So they do take some of it into account, but it's very evident that TEA is making the final decisions.
Right.
Dr. Rice, I'll just add that we're very fortunate to have Dr. Barlow on that committee. We're very assertive, I guess would be the way to say it, to get Dr. Barlow on that committee. We were very assertive about his leadership in this role and for him to be part of that committee that makes these inputs.
I absolutely appreciate that, and yeah, we're a little bit biased, but we're very happy that you're part of this team, and you're very talented. You've done a lot of great things internally with the district. You've done a lot of great things legislatively with us last session. So yeah, to have you advocate not just on our district but on behalf of everyone,
thank you.
Appreciate that. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. Yeah, I said inappropriate, negligent was popping into my mind. There's a lot of words that I could use here. So I will release the floor before I use more of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. I didn't want to mute you. Any other trustees have some questions? Walton, did you have your hand up? Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you, President Mays. I am highly concerned and agreeing totally with what Dr. Reich, the words he just used, totally unrealistic. Totally unrealistic as far as the accountability, as far as STAR testing next year, totally unrealistic to ignore the gaps that our kids are going to have. And I am beginning to feel like, I guess my question is, especially after reading these TEA pages today that just came out, are we just being set up to fail? And failure is, our kids' health hangs in the balance if we fail at this. But I look at some of these things like school teachers and staff should take the temperature of each student every day they're on campus. Really? We should probably hire more teachers, considering that we're going to have smaller class sizes and so forth. Who's going to pay for that? It says if we take these steps, we can, if we take all of these steps in the 6 pages, that we can reduce the risk to students and teachers and staff. What kind of, what are the risk numbers? Who has figured this out? There's no documentation on that this came from the CDC or some doctor or where all of this came from. I'm highly concerned about, I mean, we've got the best staff of any school district anywhere. I would stack them up against anybody. If anybody could make this work, our group could. But there's just so much at stake. And so much of it is just totally unrealistic, to use Dr. Reich's words again. So can any of you reassure me about any of this?
Well, Ms. Walton, what I'll say is that you're spot on. I mean, it's something that that is very detailed and complicated. I will say that that's the big task at hand, right? And trying to see to what level. In other words, what kind of schedule will actually be possible to implement these requirements. And, you know, the commissioner has said that this is a good preview for the fall. He's not saying this is the fall, just to be clear, but that this is a good preview for some of the fall operations. And so that's the task. You know, we do know it's balanced against the fact that the best learning happens in front of a teacher with a group of students. That fundamental thing has not changed. However, with these guidelines, that's very difficult. And then you tie all the things to it, such as funding, such as accountability, testing. And we make an argument, and I've said it to them and to Commissioner, this is not about maintaining the funding. That's important. It's about increasing the funding for the gaps, the social emotional learning support. Yes. You can't just see it as maintaining from the state level. It's got to be, how do you provide intervention funding? How do you provide funding for acceleration versus just maintaining the current? We're appreciative of maintaining the current funding. That's very important.
Yeah.
But this takes more funding to implement. So to your point, I think as the weeks go on and as we, plan for this, there may be more changes coming. And that seems to be the mode as these regulations, for example, were just released this week. I mean, just this week to be implemented June 1st if you have face-to-face summer school. So, which we're not planning at this point for the vast majority of our EY.
Right.
But good points, absolutely.
Well, and I was a teacher for a long time, and I agree, online instruction is not for everybody. And it is much better if the kids are there with a teacher and forming a relationship with that teacher. But if these guidelines, 6 feet of separation, masks, taking of temperatures, no team efforts, to work together, and just all the things that are outlined, it's not going to be good teaching. There might be, bright moments every now and then, but there's bright moments in the online digital teaching. So I don't think I can equate going back to campus, going back with a teacher in a teacher-student setting is necessarily going to be better. And the risk factor of everybody's health just lays over the whole top of everything. As I said, I'm highly concerned.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Any other questions or comments from trustees? Dr. Hill, yes, Mr. Wilbanks.
Yeah, just one quick one to tack on to what Ms. Walton was saying is I've gone through and looked at all of those requirements, and it seems insurmountable. I mean, the distancing requirements, not just in the classrooms at the elementary, but I mean, go on and on and on. And I would agree with Ms. Walton. It is going to be difficult. It is going to be expensive for us. But the question is, at what point, I don't know that we'll be allowed to go back to just all virtual without an outbreak in our community that would necessitate it. And at what point is this limited worth it? And, based on, because there is nothing that can replace the interaction with that student, with that teacher, but at what cost? And our staff, as everyone else has stated, is working night and day. I can't imagine the Herculean task that this is to kind of go through all of these requirements and see if we could even be ready. I also want to commend the staff for doing the trial runs. That's a great plan, but I'm kind of in Miss Walton's camp. It almost seems impossible to pull off, and I can't even imagine what high school is going to be like.
Oh.
Be able to enforce social distancing there.
No.
But it is what it is, and I commend the staff for all the effort of trying to make it work, and I guess we'll see.
Well, I sure need to see some risk assessment on this plan from TEA, just the summer plan even, if that's possible.
And Ms. Walton, was that a question that you wanted an answer to, or is that just rhetorical?
Well, I don't know that it's possible. I don't know that there's time to do a risk assessment. I mean, we're starting school literally in less than 3 months. But it just, you know, we're just playing with fire. And it's totally unrealistic. Thank you, Dr. Rush. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Walton. Any other comments from trustees? Okay, I did have a question from Dr. Hill, but now listening to everyone talk, I'm sure there really is no real answer, but my thought just was looking at just the transportation piece, reducing routes. So, you know, who do you pick up? Who do you not pick up? We're social distancing, so you're going to have less students on a bus, and we're reducing routes. So just, I don't know. It sounds like a huge Rubik's Cube to me. What will be interesting is I would like to hear, I mean, as sad as this is and as frustrating as it is something that all ISDs are experiencing. So I'd be very interested as the days go on, since this did just come out, but kind of what some of their plans are on how they're going to move forward and make plans to do this. In addition, I'm just kind of also sitting back watching to find out when will the next change be to what we're doing. And the one thing that I really don't want to see is we're talking about the impact that it will have, and not only on our students, but the staff, as I believe Mr. Wilbanks was saying. I'm thinking the same thing. I mean, how much more can we put on staff to create and do something that I don't know how well vetted out it was to even know how possible
Yes.
it is. And I truly do believe that we've got a staff, if we're going to make it happen, this is definitely a staff to do it, but at what cost? And I don't know that I want to see what that cost is. So those are just my comments. And once again, I mean, thank the staff for every single thing that they're doing.
Yes.
Make sure that we're following the correct protocols to make sure that our students are safe in whatever environment they're going to be, whether it's at home or whether it's in the schools. Such a Herculean task, and you're taking it on. And, you know, we are not patronizing you. Just want to make sure that the public knows, who may not know, how much is really happening behind the scenes with a remedy of we hope so. So just once again, just thank y'all very much for the very hard work that you're doing right now. And our concern is the health and well-being of our staff and our students. And we just have to continue to also focus on that.
And their families.
Their families. So thank you very much, Ms. Powell, Dr. Barlow, Dr. Hill, and Dr. Wurtz. Thank you all very much. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to continue on our agenda for open forum for non-agenda items. Ms. Benjamin has let me know that we have no requesters registered to address the board regarding any non-agenda items, so we will move forward on the agenda. Next is our superintendent's report. Bring us a smile, Dr. Cavazos.
Well, thank you, President Mays. And I'll start with thanking one more time our entire team in Arlington ISD. And that means the entire team, all 8,000 plus employees. Thanking our students and their parents for their patience. So I thank them often. You know, as we continue, we do have the right team, and we will continue to adjust, and we will bring other updates to the board. And so this is a continuing conversation. And I think that's an important point. I'll also want to thank the board for your leadership during this time. It's important to have a strong board and a strong team at all times in a school district, but it's even more important during these times. And so I just sincerely thank you. I know our community thanks you, and our staff and students thank you for your leadership throughout this difficult period of time. Graduation is upon us. We're, I think, I don't know, 16 days, maybe. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Mays there. Graduation is upon us. And I do want to take a special moment to thank again all the staff that's working on coordinating that and the details, the communication, and all that. Very, very important. I want to thank also Charlotte Jones from the Dallas Cowboys and the Jones family. Their very generous donation to open up AT&T Stadium so that our students can have graduation on June the 5th, 6th, and 7th. And so that's a very generous offer and donation from them. Look forward to seeing our students. It'll be a special time for the class of 2020 and their accomplishments, their perseverance, and their leadership really through this time as the senior class of 2020. So looking forward to that as well. So once again, thank the community and our students and everyone for their patience. We will continue to provide updates on all matters. Visit our website. Thank you to Ms. Foster and her team for the communication, the constant communication to our families and our staff. With that, Ms. Mays, that's my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavazos. Do we have any trustees that have reports? Ms. Fowler, you are muted.
Is that better?
That is so much.
All right. I've received a lot of calls and texts and emails from lots of parents of seniors, and they are so grateful for being able to have a graduation. And they know, they've all said, we know there's been so much work put into this and a lot of people trying to make this work, and they really are grateful. They're very, very appreciative of all the work that's gone in so that their student can have a graduation.
Good deal. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Ms. Walton.
Oh, nothing. I'm just nodding, agreeing with Mrs. Fowler.
Oh, okay. You were unmuted. Any other trustees have any report? Okay, so I would just like to end our meeting, first of all, saying thank you once again. Tonight, myself and my colleague were sworn in by Congressman Mark Vesey to serve our newly re-elected terms as school board members. Appreciate Congressman Vesey for taking out of his very busy schedule to support other elected officials. So congratulations once again to you, Mr. Hogg. I'd also like to make sure that I say thank you to my colleagues for our organizational vote this evening for president, and your confidence in me to continue leading such an amazing, awesome group of trustees that have truly servants' hearts, truly want to make sure that our students are successful, and that work and the synergy with the administration staff, as Dr. Cavazos alluded to earlier, is so very, very important. And once again, I'm honored to not only be able to serve as president, but to serve with everyone that's sitting here this evening. And finally, just another reminder, June 5th through 7th on seniors. And as Ms. Fowler said, I'm still returning emails that were given to me. Everybody, I will get to you, I promise, but I'm just glad that the news is good. So with that being said and seeing nothing else, Ms. Secretary, do we have anything to report?
No, Madam President, we do not.
Okay. So with that being said, it is 7:52 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.